You are scrolling through your phone at 11 at night, and somehow, without ever deciding to, you have added 3 things to a cart you did not know existed an hour ago. A pair of shoes you do not need. A gadget that promises to fix a problem you did not know you had. A hoodie in a colour you already own in 2 other shades. And for a moment, right before you tap Buy Now, there is a small, strange feeling of relief, almost like something inside you has been waiting all day for exactly this. That feeling is not random, and it is not weakness either. It is one of the oldest tricks your brain plays on you, and once you understand how it works, you will start noticing it everywhere, in every store, every app, every ad that seems to know exactly what you are missing before you do. To understand why this happens, we have to go back to something psychologists discovered decades ago about how the human brain processes reward. Every time you buy something new, your brain releases a small hit of dopamine, the same chemical involved in almost every habit-forming behavior you can think of. But here is the part. Most people never learn. The dopamine does not come from owning the item. It comes from the anticipation of getting it. This is why the moment right before you click purchase often feels better than the moment the package actually arrives. Your brain rewarded you for the chase, not the catch, and by the time the box shows up at your door, the emotional high has already faded, leaving behind an object that quietly loses its meaning within days. This is where the trap becomes systemic rather than personal. Retailers and advertisers have spent over a century studying exactly this mechanism, refining it, and building entire industries around triggering it on command. The scarcity countdown timer on a checkout page, the only 2 left in stock warning, the influencer casually mentioning a product mid-sentence like it is not an advertisement at all. None of these are accidents. They are engineered psychological triggers designed to interrupt your rational decision-making and replace it with urgency. Because urgency bypasses the part of your brain that would normally ask, do I actually need this? And for a generation that grew up with a screen in one hand from childhood, this system did not arrive later in life once financial habits were already formed. It arrived first, shaping the very foundation of how spending feels before anyone ever taught the math behind it. Now, here is where it gets deeper. Because buying things we do not need was never really about the things themselves. Researchers studying consumer behavior have found that a huge percentage of impulsive purchases are tied not to necessity but to identity. The desire to feel like a certain kind of person, someone put together, someone successful, someone who belongs. When you buy a product an influencer uses, you are not just buying an object, you are buying a small piece of the identity attached to it, even if only for a moment. This explains why the feeling fades so fast after the purchase, because the identity was never really transferred, only borrowed, and borrowed feelings have to be repaid with more spending to keep the illusion going. This cycle has a mathematical cost that almost nobody calculates in real time. A $20 impulse purchase does not feel significant on its own, which is exactly why it is so dangerous, because the brain evaluates spending in isolated moments rather than cumulative patterns. But if that same $20 had instead been invested at an average historical market return, compounding over 20 years, it would not remain $20, it would grow into something closer to $200. And if that pattern repeated weekly rather than as a single purchase, the number stops looking like pocket change and starts looking like the difference between financial stress and financial freedom decades later. The tragedy is not the $20 itself, it is that the $20 was never really about the item. It was a chemical reward the brain demanded, and the brain does not care whether that reward costs you nothing or costs you your future. Zooming out even further, this entire system reveals something uncomfortable about how modern economies function. Consumer spending drives a massive share of economic activity, which means there is enormous financial incentive for companies to keep this psychological cycle running as efficiently as possible. The economy does not benefit from you feeling financially secure and content with what you already own. It benefits from a small, persistent sense that you are missing something, that satisfaction is one purchase away. This is not a conspiracy, it is simply an incentive structure, but understanding that incentive structure changes everything about how you interpret the ads, the algorithms, and the endless stream of things that suddenly feel necessary the moment you see someone else has them. Here is where the identity shift happens, because once you see this system clearly, you cannot unsee it. Every future purchase becomes a moment where you can pause and ask a different question. Not do I want this, but why do I want this right now, in this exact moment? Is it solving an actual need, or is it solving a feeling, a boredom, a comparison, a small ache of not being enough? That single pause, just a few seconds of awareness, is often enough to interrupt the entire dopamine loop before it completes itself, because the system depends on speed, on impulse, on skipping the analytical brain entirely. And awareness is the one thing it cannot survive. The solution is not to stop buying things, and it is not to live in restriction or guilt every time you want something nice, because that kind of thinking tends to collapse just as quickly as it started. The real solution is building a small gap between desire and action, something as simple as a 24-hour rule for any non-essential purchase over a certain amount, a rule that gives the initial dopamine spike time to fade, so the decision that remains is closer to your actual values rather than your brain's chemical reflex. Pair that with redirecting a portion of what used to disappear into impulse spending, into something that compounds. Even a small automatic amount moved into savings or investing the moment income arrives, and the entire equation shifts, because now the brain gets to feel the small reward of progress toward a goal instead of the temporary high of a package at the door. What makes this understanding so powerful is that it does not require more income, more discipline in some abstract sense, or some dramatic life overhaul. It requires only visibility into a system that was designed to stay invisible. The next time you feel that late-night urge to buy something you cannot fully explain, you will not just feel it, you will recognize it. And recognition is the first thing that was never supposed to happen inside a system built entirely on you, never noticing at all.